What's the best workout routine? People often ask this question and think there's something like a perfect routine or a holy grail when it comes to working out. But in reality, it doesn't exist something like a single perfect routine. The reasons for that are simple. First point is that everyone is unique, has different goals and a different level. A good routine should be divided into different levels and should be adapted to your goals. You can't just copy a program from a different person with different goals and a different level and expect the same results. The second point is that even the best routine has to be changed from time to time. Your body will adapt after a while and you need to change something to set a new training stimulus. To get a better insight, we will show you 4 different goals and what you have to consider when you design a program to these goals. Always keep in mind that this is not black and white. Set the focus to one goal doesn't mean you can't improve in another one. But if you set the focus to one specific goal, you will progress faster and get the most out of it. Let's start with the first goal. Training to increase the maximum strength, also known as intramuscular coordinative training. Intramuscular coordinative improvement is one of 2 adaptations to a maximum strength training stimulus. It increases the max strength by letting more single muscle cells contract more frequent and improve the synchronism of those single contractions. Training this way means to not build muscle mass in the first place, which is good especially if you want to stay at a specific weight. This type of training needs a fresh mind and a fresh body, and a high frequency of training with a high intensity and a medium volume. A high range of variety can give you a small extra boost. A fresh mind and a fresh body means you should avoid to train until failure and to have long rest times. Try to stay at about 80% of your maximum reps for a specific resistance, which doesn't mean the intensity, but the workload. The rest should be about 3 to 5 minutes or even longer, depending on the intensity. The lower the reps or the time under tension are, the higher the intensity is, and the longer the rest times have to be. The intensity should be between 85 and 100%, which is 1 to 5 reps and 4 to 25 seconds time under tension. The volume is medium, which means you should do anything between 4 to 6 sets per muscle group. A high range of variety means that you should focus on your main goal in the first place, but also complement other exercises that aim for the same muscle group with different movement patterns. The high frequency means that you should train as often as possible to fire your brain with the stimuli for the movement. But you have to consider being as fresh as possible every time you train. So your rest time between 2 training sessions depends on how exhausted you are, and you are less exhausted when you stay away from training to failure. Intramuscular coordinative training requires a very good warm-up because the intensities are very high, and with that the risk of injury without proper warm-up is very high. The second goal, training to build muscle mass, also known as hypertrophy training. Hypertrophy is the other way of adaptation to a maximum strength training stimulus. It increases the maximum strength by letting the muscle mass itself grow and with that gain contractible mass. There are different approaches how a good hypertrophy training should look like. Almost all of them have in common that the program needs to have mechanical stress, metabolic stress, a progressive overload and a strategic deload. Let's take a closer look to these points. Mechanical stress is determined by a specific range of intensity. Mechanical stress means to offer a specific resistance to the muscles. It shouldn't be too high, but it also mustn't be too low. The intensity for a hypertrophy stimulus should be about 65 to 85% of your 1 repetition maximum. This should be about 6 to 14 reps with a time under tension of about 25 to 60 seconds. But there's no strict border. It's more a fluent transition to intramuscular coordinative training on the lower end and strength endurance training on the higher end. The metabolic stress means to exhaust the muscles, which can be reached by training to or even beyond muscular failure and by keeping the rest times short. This means about 1 to 2.5 minutes depending on the actual intensity. The progressive overload means to gain the resistance you offer to your muscles over time. If you don't overload, the body gets used to the stress and won't get another stimulus to grow after a short time. You also need the right frequency, because after a hypertrophy stimulus, the body needs about 36 to 48 hours for regeneration. After that time, you should set the next stimulus in order to increase the muscle mass. That means to train every second day. Strategic deload means to get a longer rest period after some weeks of hard training. This period should be about 7 to 14 days and depends on your ability to recover. It should give your body the possibility to recover from the prior training stress and to be able to set a new stimulus when starting back into training. There are methods that use high volume and medium intensity, and there are methods that use low volume and high intensity. Both methods claim to be the best way for hypertrophy. Some people respond better to high volume, others respond better to high intensity. So you have to test both and then choose what works better for you. It's important to mention for the max strength training methods that you never have only one of the two adaptations, but the major part is what I explained. The third goal is training for skills. Training for skills is similar to the intramuscular coordinative training, but you can vary the intensity. You still need a fresh body, and here especially a fresh mind, a high frequency, long rest times, and also a high total amount of reps, not necessarily in one set or workout, but over time. The adaptation for skill training is mostly neurological. So you have to tell your body as often as possible how the movement you want to learn works, and that with an execution as close to perfect as possible. With that, your mind can build an automatism, which means that you can do it very precise and in different situations under different influences. The intensity can vary, but when it comes to pure intermuscular coordination, it's better to have a lower intensity to allow you to do it very often and to teach your brain how it works. Of course, some skills are connected to max strength, and that's the reason you can't determine a specific intensity for all skills. The rest times have to be long, so that you always start with a fresh mind and a fresh body. This is important because you really need to execute it as good and precise as possible. Concentrate on the move and feel how all body parts are aligned to each other. It's hard to give you specific rest times and intensities for that, because it depends on what you actually do and how fast you learn the motor skills. There are also a lot of environmental things that influence those factors. You should also avoid to go anywhere near exhaustion when you only want to learn the technique alone, because this would extend the regeneration time, which means you can practice less often. In calisthenics, the skill training is often connected to max strength training. This means you should focus on being fresh, keep long rest times during the sets, a high frequency, and a very good warm-up. Always do skill and intramuscular coordinative training in the beginning of a workout, and not after an exhausting strength endurance training or other training methods that go until muscle failure. The last goal is strength endurance. Training for strength endurance means to improve your resistance against fatigue, which has only a low coordinative component, depending on the exercise. To reach that, you have to choose low intensities, medium to high volume, little rest times, and a medium frequency. Low intensities go from about 30 to 65% of your 1 repetition maximum, which means to do about 15 to 25 reps with a time under tension of about 60 to 100 seconds. It's important that you train until muscular failure or even beyond to set a sufficient stimulus for your body to adapt. The volume should be medium to high depending on your level. But when it comes to strength endurance training, it's hard to tell how many sets you should do because there are so many ways to design a strength endurance training. You can train with strict sets similar to the hypertrophy training, and you can also work with a circuit training in which you do more cycles with different exercises after each other. Most important are the rest times, which should be short. They shouldn't be much longer than 60 seconds to tell your body to regenerate faster and adapt to that with a better capillarity, higher enzymatic capacity, or better metabolic processes. Because you generate a high metabolic stress, you need some time to regenerate. It takes about 24 to 48 hours to fully regenerate, which means you can train about every second day. With some training you can reduce this time a bit, because the processes in your body get more efficient. As you can see, every goal has different ways to train for. As I told you before, that doesn't mean that you can't work on multiple things simultaneously. But too much different goals at the same time will lead to nowhere. You also have to consider that some goals can be combined and work well when others are more contrary. For example, if you train for hypertrophy, you can also add max strength or strength endurance sessions, or even complete periods to increase strength or increase capillarity. This will have a positive effect on your main goals, which in this case is muscle mass. The opposite would be a demanding skill training after a hard strength endurance training. Your strength endurance can be very good, but that doesn't mean that you will build up the necessary technique for complex skills. Here you have to set your focus on your main goal, but it's still possible to do the other one to a certain point. Focus on your main goal and add some other methods if you want and still have enough capabilities for it. You could train in periods or use a holistic training approach, but this is another story. I hope that I could give you a little insight how a good workout routine should look like. Please keep in mind that this topic is very complex and we only want to show you a little overview to understand that there is no single perfect routine for all goals. To explain all examples in all details would have been beyond the scope of this tutorial. If you have more questions, feel free to leave a comment. Thank you, Alex.